Hi everybody, thanks so much to everybody that watched yesterday, the little ladder comparison. We had Leon reach out. Leon Kennedy is the drummer in an awesome Melbourne band, some good friends of ours called The Refuge. He also does these really cool drum covers on TikTok and Instagram. And he reached out because he wanted to ask, how do you get the kick and the snare to cut through in a really distorted mix? Ladder's such a great example of that because it's a heavy, big guitar thingo mix. What are some of the tips and tricks I use with this remix? Now, previously I would use tons of compression and just bring the volume up, but when you're bringing everything up, it just ends up fighting and it doesn't quite go. So the first thing you would do is get the guitars out of the middle and get the kick and snare down the middle. That's basic panning, but that's not what you're here for. You're here for the other stuff. So here's the song. And here's just drums. All right, so Andy Wallace loved doing this cool thing, and thank you so much to Greenlight Sound and JP Henry who really broke this down. He would duplicate the snare and kick tracks, and he would have basically 2 kicks and 2 snares. I'm using the snare top and the kick in. We've got the first one, you EQ the way that you normally would. And you run a pretty tight gate on it. But then there's another kick, which you run an even tighter gate on it. And the cool thing about this one is that when you run the really tight gate, it does this clicking thing, this hear that? It was a little quirk that the SSL had, that when you had the gate release really, really fast on a fast attack as well, it would just start clicking. And so what it sounds like is nearly like a kick sample, where it just kind of snaps really, really hard. And it just gives it a bit of body and snap, so it really kind of cuts through. And then you do something really, really similar with, you do something really, really similar with the snare as well. Normal snare. And then you've got a snare hype track where you absolutely crank 7K, really, really tight gate. I've also got it cranked at 6K on a bell. Scoop all the lows out. Bit of compression as well, and it just snaps and gives you that extra body. Now there's a kick and a snare sample as well, which Andy Wallace would use quite a bit. The other little secret that he would do, which is so much fun, is a snare send and a white noise sound. So I've taken that snare track and I've duplicated it down here. And this snare just exclusively goes to a tiled room reverb. So that's my snare reverb. It's essentially the snare, the sample, the really gated sample that we've done of the original snare going to a tight room reverb. But then we also send it to a white noise generator that I've pitch shifted a little bit and gated again. And what this does is it sounds a bit like a snare, but it's not quite a snare. And so what it does is it gives you the body and the breadth of a reverb tail on your snare without it sounding completely washed out. Something Andy used to do a lot. So here's the drums without those. And here's the drums with them. And again, there's no compression on this drum bus whatsoever, so it's just kind of living like that, which is really, really exciting. You get all the dynamic in the drums, but it's still thick, it still cuts through. The other thing that is really key on the drums is having the overheads really, really present. So the overheads, I've got them quite loud. There's a lot of snare in those overheads. You really want that. We didn't have a room mic, so having that was really helpful. And then also I've got what we call a crush mic, which is pointed over the kick and at the snare. And that I'm smashing to bits. That's essentially, if you were like pick a heavily compressed sound within the drum kit that I have, it would be that. I'm sending it a little bit to a chamber reverb as well. So those are the drums. There's probably one other thing that I really want to talk about with drums, which is because it's not compressed itself, how it hits the compressor is really, really important. The compressor that's on everything. So here we've got an SSL 3 millisecond attack and an auto release, and it's really reacting to the kick and the snare. And this is what helps things cut through a mix if you're on the drums, is that the kick and the snare will hit hard, and that's the thing hitting and triggering the compression over the entire mix. And when nothing else is compressed really until it gets to that level, when it ducks everything down so that it can breathe. And so you'll just hear the drums cut through better if it's the thing triggering the compression more so than your vocals and your guitar and the rest of it. So let's do a test where we take everything off. Let's listen to it without the compressor. Guitars are really loud. And then with the compressor on, it makes the whole mix feel like it's moving up and down with the drums. So there's the little drum tips that I picked up and what I use for ladder. You can check that song out on streaming. This version is on Exit Wounds. We're absolutely stoked with it, and we'll see you soon.